Hello everybody, welcome back to Web Fundamentals course. My name is Omid Fatemi and I am here with you today to continue lesson 22. This lesson is part of module 5, getting started with dynamic sites. Today we are going to talk about different data types and also strings, and then we will talk about arrays, either arrays of numbers or arrays of strings. One of the beauties of JavaScript is its flexibility regarding data types. You will find that usually you don't need to specify the type of data when you want to store a value into a variable. You just use it, and then JavaScript will know how to handle that and what kind of data type puts for that variable. Let's explore some common data types. Number data types. So it is very common that you would like to use numbers in your programs. You may use different numbers, either integer like 3 or a floating point number like 1.41, 42, and so on. Boolean data types. They have only two values, either true or false. They are going to be used mainly in conditions. String data types. String data types contains characters, one or more characters. For example, hello world, as you could see, and it is in double quote, it is a string. We will see later that strings are represented as objects, and we will know what do we mean by objects later. And the other data type is null. So this is just a data type that has a value of null, and it represents that there is an undefined variable and it's an empty variable. As I told you, JavaScript is a dynamically typed language, so it converts the data types automatically. For example, you write document.write, you know this method. The total is a string inside double quote, so it is a string, and then plus, which is the operator for concatenation of strings, and then total. Total is a number data type, has a number data type, and here we are concatenating a string to total. So JavaScript dynamically converts this total to a string and concatenates these two together and makes a new string which will be displayed in the page. But this conversion cannot happen every time. For example, if total is a string here, then you cannot divide it by 3. And if you write total divide by 3, then there is an error and JavaScript cannot handle that. So what to do? JavaScript has specific functions for converting a string to an integer number. For example, parse int for converting to integer, or parse float for converting to floating point number. These functions read a number from the beginning of the string. The string could be long, but the first number that JavaScript could find at the beginning of the string would be considered. For example, the string is 30 angry polar bears. When you use parse int function to convert this to integer number, the first number is 30. So the number would be 30. If there is nothing there and JavaScript cannot find integer at the beginning of the number, it says it returns NaN, not a number value. Now let's talk about strings. You knew what strings are, but I should say that strings is not just like a numeric data type which has a type and it could be stored in a variable. Strings are also represented as objects. When you want to create a string, like what we talked about, a number, you just write var total gets 30. Here you could write var string test, which is the name of the variable, and a string. So what it does, it creates a string object and puts the value of this is a test for that. Or you could use the keyword new, which we will use for objects. So you could say a string test gets a new object, a new instance of a string, and the initial value would be this is a test. When you created a string, then you want to assign a value to it. So it's very simple that you write a string gets equal sign and a value. You could concatenate strings with operator plus. For example, you could write a string test1 plus a string test2. They will be concatenated together and create a new string. Sometimes if there are two strings that you want to make them together and put a space between, so you have to write also, for example, str1 plus then a space plus str2. Another property, because a string is object, it has properties and it has methods. One useful property is length. When you use length, then you get the length of the string. For example, this string, this is a test. How many characters does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14. So the length of that string would be 14. There are two useful methods for converting the case of a string. For example, you could say to uppercase. Then it will convert the string to uppercase, or to lowercase, which it converts it to lowercase. For example, you write document.write, and the object, the method write, and a string dot. You remember, if you want to use properties or methods of an object, you use dot and then the method to lowercase. Sometimes you want to have a portion of the string. So there is substring method in JavaScript. For example, consider alpha as this string, which has 26 characters. Then you write alpha.substring, a method. In parentheses, as a parameters, you put 0 and 4. 0 means the first index, the beginning of the substring, and the string starts from 0. So 0 is the first character and 4 is the fifth character, but this is exclusive for, not inclusive for. So what does it do? It will extract A, B, C, D, 0 and 4. In substring, you could put any number, 10 and 12, for example, it returns KL. But if you put even an index which is greater than the second index, JavaScript knows that you mean 10 and 12. Then again, it returns KL. And you remember, this is exclusive. So when you write 6 and 7, then it means that it returns only one character, which starts at 6, which is actually the 7th character of the string. Another useful method is char@, which returns a single character, alpha.char@ 0. So it means the first letter of the string. The next useful method is indexOf method, which is used to find a string inside another string. For example, a string test.indexOf. Actually, indexOf could accept two parameters. If you just put one parameter, the string that we would like to search for, then it starts from the beginning of the string and search for this instance, and as soon as it finds it, it returns the index of that string. But if you put the second parameter, then it starts from that character. For example, if I put 5, then it starts from the 5 position, which is the 6th character. It is useful when you want to find multiple instances of a substring inside a string. You just search for the first one, and then you put the index at the next character, and then you search again, and then again and again and again. Another useful method is last index of. So it starts from at the end of the string and looks for the substring, and when it finds it, then it returns the index of that position. The next useful data structure is array. We start with numeric arrays. Arrays are a group of data treated as a single unit. You just use a name, and then it refers to a number of elements. For example, scores get new, because we are defining a new array, and we put values of 39, 40, 100, and 49. As you could see here, we are creating an array of 4 numbers. So this is a numeric array. Or we could create the array in this way. For example, we say scores is new array 4, which means that the array should have 4 elements, and then we define each element. The elements are indicated with a square brace, and then we say scores 0. So it means that the first element of scores get 39. Or you could use the shorthand format like this: scores get a square brace at the left square brace, and at the end right square brace, and then the numbers, and they are separated by comma. Again, with array, there is a property called length, which returns the number of elements. For example, a scores dot length. So for the scores that we defined before, the length would be 4. And as I mentioned, you could access every element of the array using index notation with a square brace. Now that we talked about integer arrays, numeric arrays, it is good to talk about string arrays. They're the same, but instead of the elements of numbers, they have elements of strings. For example, you say names get, then again square brace, and then you put the strings as the elements. Here we are defining an array of names with 2 elements. The first element is John H. Watson, and the second element is the string of Sherlock Holmes. Or you could write again names gets new array 30, and then for each element of that array you put a string. For example, names 0 gets John H. Watson. Or you could define the array and put the initial values when you are defining the array. I should tell you that also in numeric arrays and also in string arrays, you remember when you want to put values in a string, in an array, you use square braces. But when you are creating an array and you are putting an initial value for that, of course, you should use parentheses for making the initial value. When we have an array, a string array, then it means that every element of that array is a string. So you could have all the methods and properties that we have discussed for a string. For example, you could write names 0, which is a string, and then you put the method of substring for that. There is a good method for a string which will split a string to an array. For example, you say we have this name is John space q dot space public, and then we would like to split it using space as the character for splitting. So we write parts gets name, which is the string, dot split, and as a parameter we pass a space. So what it does, it goes through the string and looks for the space, and if it finds it, it make it a substring. I will ask you about how it worked in an interactive question coming up at the end of this slide. And also there is another method which does the reverse thing. For example, if you have an array, for example parts, then you want to put them together as one string with a character in between, either space or comma, then you could use join method and it will generate a new string. Now answer this interactive question. Since we have talked about arrays, it is good to talk about sorting, because one of the things that you would like to do with a number of elements to sort them. So we have a sort method for arrays. It sorts alphabetically. It sorts alphabetically, not numerically. For example, you have a string called names, then you use this method of sort and it will change the names string with as a sorted string, and then you can, for example, put it in another string. But for numeric values, it doesn't work right because it sorts alphabetically. For example, when you have a value of 12, a number of 12, and also you have a number of 5, in numeric word 5 is less than 12, so it should be sorted out first and then 12. But in alphabetically word 12 is less than 5 because it starts with 1, and 1 is less than 5 in alphabets. So what to do if we want to sort an array of numbers? So we could define a comparison function by ourselves and tell JavaScript to use this function for your sorting. For example, we define a function called number compare, and then this function, which is just the subtraction of A and B, we use this function for sorting. Then it works great. It works numerically correctly. Now let's see an example of a code for sorting numbers and strings. In this script, we first ask the user to enter numbers and names, and then we sort them. Let's take a look at the code. Here in our HTML file, as you can see, we have input of new number and also input of new name. And in our form, we have a button for adding name and also a button for adding number. And the event handler for clicking on the button is sort names, and for the numbers is sort numbers. And let's now take a look at the JavaScript code. In JavaScript, we have 4 global variables, actually 2 global variables and 2 global arrays. Number names, number numbers, so they are initialized at 0, and whenever we add a number or a name, it will be incremented. And then we have an array of names and we have an array of numbers. So in the sort names function, what we do, we get the value from the input field and we add it to our array of names. So the number names refer to the element in the array, and it is incremented here. So the next time this function executed, it has a new element, and this is why we have made it global. So it will be in the whole script, it will be the one number names. The same thing is for sort numbers. So now let's look at the page. Here is the page. As you could see, we have 2 fields, 2 input fields, one for add name and the other for add number. I start adding names. For example, John. I add the name, so you see it appears here. The next name, for example, is Mary. I add it here, so you see it is sorted also. The next will be Bob. So it is sorted. And let's say, for example, Zach and Omid. You see, whenever I click add name, it gets the input field, it adds to the array, and then it sort them and bring them here in sorted name. Let me show you the code, how it comes here. In the code, you see at the end of the code, here we have document the form sorted value becomes names.join. So the array of names will be joined together with the splitting character of new line. So every name would be put in one line, as you could see in the example here. You see, just let me show you. For example, I add Omid here. When I do this, you see Omid is coming at the end of the list. Why? Because it starts with a lowercase, and uppercase letters are alphabetically, they are coming first and then lower letters. So this is the thing. So let me go to the number. I add, for example, 120. Then I add 1300. Now I add 5. So as you could see, 5 is sorted at the end after 120 and 1300. Why? Because it is being sorted alphabetically, not the numeric value. Now we are going to change the code, so we define our custom compare function. So as you could see in this function, we are using sort first. Now we change it and we make another function called another call to function sort, but this time with a custom compare function which is called number compare. So I should comment this code and use this line, and in our number compare function we are getting 2 value and just return a minus b. Now let's test this code. I just refresh again. Here again I put, let's say, 120, 1300, and now I put 5. You see, this time 5 is sorted first. Now it is sorting as the numbers, not the strings, not alphabetically. You see 5, 12, 67, 120, and 1300. In summary, what we have talked today was about dynamic typing, very good flexibility in JavaScript. Then we talked about basic data types, 4 data types I've introduced for you. And then we talked about automatic type conversion. And then we talked about arrays, and then sorting for arrays. And also, again, I remind you of case sensitivity for the variable names. And also remember to use the functions property. For example, don't use a string in a numeric operator, which will generate NaN, not a number. Now take part in the interactive quiz. Thank you for doing the quiz. Now you could go to the site and reflect on what you have learned. For example, talk about dynamic typing, and also talk about sorting. And the next one would be the numeric arrays and string arrays. Then you would have an assignment of data type exploration. Write a JavaScript script that declares different variables, for example, number, boolean, string, and null, and then showcase the dynamic typing. When you change something, what happens to the dynamic typing. And also, if you need a number from a string, use parseInt and parsefloat, and use different string methods like uppercase, lowercase, and so on. Also, make an array and manipulate data, and don't forget to put comments in your code. And that would be the rubric for your assignment. So now go to the site and look at the textbook, and then reflect, and then do your assignment and submit your work. And for the next topic, then we go for functions in JavaScript. Thank you for being with me. Now go for the next activity. Have a good time.